I never thought I'd be sharing my story on the internet. Life is a way of surprising you, I guess. My name is Jason, and I'm a software engineer in Silicon Valley. This is the story of how my perfect marriage crumbled before my eyes. 3 years ago, I met Ashley at a tech conference in San Francisco. I was there presenting our company's latest cloud computing solution. She was handling the marketing for her firm's booth across the hall. The first thing I noticed about her was her laugh. It wasn't one of those polite, corporate chuckles. It was genuine, infectious, and drew people to her like moths to a flame. I'm usually the quiet type, more comfortable with code than conversation. But something about her made me want to step out of my comfort zone. During the lunch break, I found myself walking over to her booth. "Your presentation was really impressive," she said before I could even introduce myself. I was surprised she'd noticed me at all. "Though I only understood about half of what you were talking about," she added with a wink. That's how it started, with a simple conversation about tech jargon and marketing speak. We ended up talking through the entire lunch break. She gave me her business card, and I actually used it, something I'd never done before. Our first date was at a small coffee shop in Palo Alto. She showed up in jeans and a Stanford hoodie, looking nothing like the polished marketing executive I'd met. I liked this version of her even better. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. She told me about growing up in Chicago, her dreams of making it big in Silicon Valley. I shared stories about my coding adventures and startup failures. She didn't just listen. She asked questions, seemed genuinely interested. That's what drew me to Ashley, her ability to make you feel like the most fascinating person in the room. Our relationship moved quickly after that. Weekend hikes in the Bay Area turned into weekend getaways. Coffee dates became dinner dates. Soon, we were spending every free moment together. My friends noticed the change in me. "You're smiling more," my brother Chris kept saying. He was right. Ashley brought out a side of me I didn't know existed. She taught me to loosen up, to enjoy life beyond lines of code. I introduced her to the beauty of debugging, and she actually enjoyed it. She called it solving life's little puzzles. We moved in together after 6 months. Some said it was too fast, but when you know, right? Our apartment became a perfect blend of our personalities. My minimalist tech setup merged with her colorful art pieces. She filled our home with plants and positive energy. I added smart home features that made her laugh and roll her eyes. My tech genius, she called me, half teasing, half proud. The proposal happened on a random Tuesday. No elaborate plans, no fancy restaurant. Just us cooking dinner in our kitchen. She was telling me about her day, gesturing wildly with a wooden spoon. Tomato sauce splattered everywhere. And I just knew this was it. This was who I wanted to spend my life with. I pulled out the ring I'd been carrying for weeks. She said yes before I could even finish asking. The sauce burned, but we didn't care. We were too busy calling our families, sharing the news. Our wedding was exactly like us, a mix of traditional and quirky. She walked down the aisle to the theme from The Matrix. My vows included a coding metaphor that made all the tech people laugh. Her vows made everyone cry. It was perfect. The first year of marriage was everything I'd hoped for and more. We settled into a comfortable routine. Morning coffee together before work. Text throughout the day. Evening walks in our neighborhood. Weekend brunches with friends. She'd drag me to social events I'd usually avoid. I'd teach her about the latest tech trends. We were that couple everyone loved to hate. Always happy, always in sync. Then things started to change. It was subtle at first. So subtle that I questioned if I was imagining it. Ashley started spending more time on her phone. She'd smile at messages when she thought I wasn't looking. Her Instagram posts became more frequent, more carefully curated. "It's for work," she'd say when I asked about it. And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? Then Mike entered the picture. He was the new sales director at her company. Ashley mentioned him casually at first. "Mike gave an amazing presentation today. Mike's really revolutionizing our sales approach. Mike thinks we should try this new strategy." I didn't think much of it initially. After all, she was passionate about her work. It made sense that she'd talk about her colleagues. But the frequency of Mike's name in our conversations increased. She started staying later at work. Big project, she'd explain. Mike's really pushing us to meet these deadlines. I trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? She was my wife, my partner, my best friend. Then came the company holiday party. Ashley insisted I come, even though she knew I hated corporate events. I want to show off my handsome husband, she said. That's when I met Mike. Tall, confident, with the kind of smile that belonged in toothpaste commercials. He shook my hand firmly, maintaining eye contact a second too long. So you're the famous Jason, he said. Ashley talks about you all the time. Something in his tone made me uneasy, but I brushed it off as my social anxiety acting up. I watched them interact throughout the night. The way they laughed at inside jokes. How they finished each other's sentences. The casual touches that seemed just a bit too familiar. They worked closely together. I told myself, this is normal colleague behavior. But something had shifted that night. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I felt it. A crack in our perfect world. As Clay's phone became her constant companion. She'd take it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. She'd angle the screen away when I walked by. Started putting it face down on tables. Changed her password for the first time since I'd known her. Again, I told myself I was being paranoid. This was Ashley, my Ashley. The woman who cried during our first dance. Who brought me soup when I was sick. Who knew exactly how to make me laugh after a bad day. She wouldn't. She couldn't. But the changes kept coming. She started going to the gym more often. Bought new clothes. Changed her hair. I just want to feel good about myself, she said. And I supported her. Of course I did. I wanted her to be happy. Then came the conversation that changed everything. It was a regular Thursday evening. We were having dinner. Takeout because she'd been too busy to cook. Jason, she said, putting down her fork. We need to talk. Those words, they never mean anything good, do they? I've been thinking about our marriage, she continued. My heart started racing. I love you, she said, but I feel like we're stuck in a rut. I waited, fork suspended midair. I've been reading about modern relationships, she went on, about how monogamy is just a social construct. My stomach dropped. What if we tried opening up our marriage? The words hit me like a physical blow. Just to spice things up, she added quickly. Keep things exciting. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't process what I was hearing. It doesn't mean I love you any less, she said, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. Is there someone specific you have in mind? I heard myself ask. Her hesitation was all the answer I needed. Mike, I said. It wasn't a question. She didn't deny it. It's not what you think, she said quickly. We haven't done anything. I wouldn't. Not without talking to you first. But they thought about it, talked about it, planned it. While I was at home, trusting her, loving her, they were planning this. This isn't about Mike, she insisted. It's about us, about growing together. I stood up, my dinner forgotten. Growing together. I repeated, by sleeping with other people. You could too, she offered, like that made it better. If there's someone you're interested in. I cut her off. I'm interested in my wife, I said. Only my wife. Jason, please, she stood up too. Just think about it. There's nothing to think about, I said. If you do this, if you sleep with him, we're done. That's not fair, she protested. You're not even willing to consider it. I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd become my whole world, who was now suggesting we tear that world apart. No, I said simply. I'm not. She started crying then. Said I was being closed-minded, that I was holding her back, that this was why modern marriages failed. I let her talk, let her cry, let her tea. Rita convinced me, but my mind was made up. This was my line in the sand. Finally, she seemed to understand. Okay, she said, wiping her eyes. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have brought it up. She hugged me, and I held her. But something had changed. The crack I'd felt at the holiday party, it was now a chasm, and I had no idea how to bridge it. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling. Ashley slept peacefully beside me, or pretended to. I couldn't tell anymore. I couldn't tell anything anymore. The woman I thought I knew better than anyone. The marriage I thought was unshakable. Everything felt uncertain now. I reached for my phone, opened my messages, stared at Chris's name for a long moment. But what would I say? How could I explain this? So I put the phone away, closed my eyes, and tried to convince myself that everything would be okay, that this was just a bump in the road, that we'd get past it. But deep down, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The next few weeks were a masterclass in pretending. Ashley acted like our conversation never happened. She was extra attentive, almost too perfect, making my favorite meals, sending sweet texts throughout the day, planning date nights. But something felt off, like watching a movie where the audio doesn't quite sync with the video. Everything looked right on the surface, but underneath, there was a disconnect. I tried to ignore it, try to focus on the good things. The way she still curled into me while we watched TV. How she'd leave coffee ready for me in the morning. The post-it notes with hearts she'd stick on my laptop. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Her phone was still her constant companion. Now more than ever, she'd step out to take calls. Work stuff, she'd say with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. But doubt is like a virus. Once it gets in, it spreads. I started noticing patterns. How she'd always position herself so I couldn't see her screen. The way she'd quickly switch apps when I walked by. Her late nights at the office becoming more frequent. Big project with Mike's team, she'd explain. Always Mike. Always projects. Always explanations that made perfect sense. Yet somehow didn't make sense at all. Chris noticed something was wrong. My brother has always been able to read me like a book. You seem distracted, he said during our weekly lunch. I shrugged it off, blamed it on work stress, but he kept watching me with concerned eyes. Then came the business trip. Ashley's company was sending her team to New York. A week-long conference. Mike would be there, of course. It's a great opportunity, she said, packing her suitcase. I helped her fold her clothes, tried to ignore the new lingerie I didn't recognize. Just want to feel confident, she said when she caught me looking. I nod. Ed, what else could I do? The week she was gone was torture. Her texts became sporadic. Short replies to my messages. No more heart emojis. No more miss you messages. Conference is crazy busy, she'd explain. I threw myself into work. Stayed late at the office. Wrote code until my eyes burned. Anything to keep my mind occupied. Anything to avoid thinking about what might be happening in New York. Then came the Instagram post. A group photo at a rooftop bar. Ashley in a dress I'd never seen. Standing next to Mike. His hand on her waist. Both of them laughing at something off camera. The caption. Work hard. Play harder. Hashtag best team. I stared at that photo for hours, analyzed every pixel, every smile, every point of contact. My brother called that night. He'd seen the post too. Want to talk about it? He asked. I didn't, but I needed to. So I told him everything. The conversation about opening our marriage, the changes I'd noticed, the growing pit in my stomach. Chris listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. You need to trust your gut, he finally said. But you also need proof. He was right. I knew he was right. But getting proof meant crossing a line, invading her privacy, becoming someone I never wanted to be. Yet here I was. The night Ashley returned from New York. She was tired from the flight. Went straight to shower. Her phone lay on the kitchen counter. Face down. Password protected. But I knew her patterns. The way she'd check it first thing after showering. So I waited. And sure enough, the notification light started blinking. One message. Then another. And another. I could hear the water still running. Could hear her humming her favorite song. My hands were shaking as I picked up her phone. The messages displayed on the lock screen. From Mike. Miss you already. Last night was... The preview cut off there. But it was enough. More than enough. I put the phone down exactly as I'd found it. Walked to our home office. Sat down at my desk. Opened my laptop. And started researching divorce lawyers. The water stopped running. I could hear her moving around in our bedroom, humming that same damn song. My phone buzzed. A text from Chris. You okay? I wasn't. Not even close. But I replied, I will be. Because what else could I say? How do you tell someone your world is falling apart? That the person you trusted most has betrayed you? That everything you believed in was a lie? I heard Ashley's footsteps approaching. Hey babe, she said from the doorway. What are you working on? I turned to look at her. Hair wet from the shower. Wearing my old Stanford t-shirt. Looking exactly like the woman I fell in love with. Just catching up on some emails, I lied. She smiled. Walked over to kiss my cheek. I missed you, she said. And for the first time in our marriage. I didn't say it back. The next few days were a blur. I went through the motions. Went to work. Came home. Ate dinner. Watched TV. All while carrying this knowledge inside me. This poison. Ashley seemed oblivious to my inner turmoil. Or maybe she was just better at pretending. She told me about the conference. Carefully edited versions of her days. Never mentioning the nights. Never mentioning Mike. I listened. Nodded at the right moments. Asked appropriate questions. All while thinking about those messages. About what last night meant. About how long this had been going on. I started documenting everything. Every late night at the office. Every suspicious text. Every time she mentioned Mike. My brother thought I should confront her immediately. But I needed more. Needed to be sure. Needed evidence that even she couldn't deny. Then came the moment that changed everything. A simple mistake on her part. She left her laptop open while making coffee. Gmail logged in. And there it was. An email thread with Mike. Subject line. Last night. I shouldn't have looked. But I did. The emails went back months. Long before the New York trip. Before the conversation about opening our marriage. They'd been planning it all along. Testing the waters. Seeing how I'd react. The things they said about me. How naive I was. How trusting. How they laughed about it. I took screenshots. Sent them to my personal email. Then closed her laptop. Just in time. She came back with 2 coffee mugs. Here you go, babe, she said with a smile. I took the mug. Thanked her. Watched her walk away. And felt something inside me break. Or maybe it was something finally clicking into place. The clarity that comes with absolute certainty. I knew what I had to do now. No more doubts. No more second guessing. No more pretending. It was time to end this charade. But first, I needed a plan. Needed to be smart about this. Because Ashley, she taught me one valuable lesson. Sometimes the people closest to you, the ones you trust the most, they're the ones you need to guard against. And I was done being naive. Done being the trusting fool they'd laughed about. It was time to take control of my story. Even if it meant writing an ending I never wanted to write. I spent the next week preparing. Methodically. Carefully. Like debugging a complex piece of code. First, I secured all our financial accounts. Moved half of our joint savings to a new account. Documented every asset we owned. Then I contacted the best divorce lawyer in Silicon Valley. Sarah Chun had a reputation for being ruthless but fair. Bring me everything you have, she said during our consultation. So I did. The screenshots. The timestamps of suspicious meetings. The credit card statements showing hotel charges. She reviewed it all with clinical precision. This is good, she said finally. Very thorough. What's next? I asked. Now we prepare for the confrontation. But life has a way of derailing even the best laid plans. It happened on a Tuesday night. Ashley was supposedly at a late meeting. I was working from home when my phone buzzed with a message from Chris. A photo. Ashley and Mike at a restaurant downtown, looking very much not like they were at a business meeting. I was meeting a client, Chris wrote. Saw them by chance. My hands were shaking as I typed back. How long have they been there? At least an hour. Pretty cozy. I stared at the photo, her hand on his arm, the intimate way they were leaning toward each other. The wine glasses, the casual touches, everything I'd been suspecting, right there in high definition. I called Sarah. I'm ready, I said when she answered. Are you sure? She asked. Because once we start this, I'm sure. I waited up for Ashley that night, sitting in the dark of our living room, her key in the lock at 11:30, the lights flicking on, her startled gasp when she saw me. Jason, you scared me. I didn't respond, just looked at her, really looked at her. The slight smudge of her lipstick, the flush in her cheeks, the guilt in her eyes when she met my gaze. How was the meeting? I asked quietly. Good, she said quickly. Productive. At La Maison. She froze. Just for a second, but long enough. How did you? I held up my phone, showed her the photo Chris had sent. Watched the color drain from her face. It's not what you think, she started. Don't. I cut her off. Just don't. Jason, please let me explain. Explain what? I asked. How long you been lying to me? How long you been laughing at me with him? She started crying. Those same tears that once moved me. Now they just made me angry. I never meant to hurt you, she sobbed. Really? I pulled out my laptop, opened the screenshots of her emails with Mike. Because these tell a different story. She stared at the screen, at her own words, at the evidence of her betrayal. How did you get those? That's what she focused on. Not the betrayal, not the lies, but how I'd caught her. Does it matter? I asked. What matters is it's over. All of it. She switched tactics then, anger replacing tears. You went through my private emails? How dare you invade my privacy like that? I laughed. Actually laughed. That's what you're upset about. Not the months of lying, not the cheating, not the way you and Mike mocked me. She fell silent, finally realizing the depth of what I knew. I've already talked to a lawyer, I said. You'll be hearing from her tomorrow. Jason, wait. She reached for me. I stepped back. Don't touch me. Please, she begged. We can fix this. I'll end things with Mike. We can go to counseling. I shook my head. There's nothing to fix. You killed this marriage. Killed at the moment you chose him. I love you, she whispered. No, I said. You'll owe yourself. I was just convenient. Safe. The reliable engineer who'd never suspect. Never question. Well, guess what? I did suspect. I did question. And now I'm done. I grabbed my pre-packed bag from the office. I'm staying with Chris. My lawyer will contact yours. She followed me to the door, still pleading, still crying, still trying to manipulate me. But I was immune now, to her tears, to her promises, to everything. I walked out without looking back. Chris was waiting in his car outside. You okay? He asked as I got in. No. Yen suara tunasuli. But I will be. As we drove away, I could see Ashley in the doorway, getting smaller in the rearview mirror, just like the life we'd built together, fading into the distance, becoming nothing more than a cautionary tale, a lesson in trust, and its betrayal. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings. Ashley tried everything to stop the divorce, begged for another chance, promised to change, swore she'd never see Mike again. But it was too late. The trust was gone, shattered like a dropped mirror. No way to put it back together. Her parents got involved, called me selfish, unforgiving, unable to see the bigger picture. But what picture were they seeing? One where their daughter's betrayal was somehow acceptable? Where my pain didn't matter? My lawyer handled everything professionally. The evidence was overwhelming. Ashley's attempts to paint herself as the victim fell flat, especially when more photos surfaced. More evidence of her deception. She'd been careless in her arrogance, thinking I'd never find out, never look too closely, never question her stories. But I had, and now she was facing the consequences. The divorce proceedings moved quickly. Asset division, property settlement, all the technical details of undoing a life together. It was like debugging code, finding the errors, removing the corrupted parts, starting fresh. Mike disappeared from the picture the moment things got serious, just like I knew he would. Ashley was devastated, but I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just emptiness. And maybe that was the biggest change of all. How someone who once meant everything could become nothing. In the space of a few months, Chris helped me find a new apartment, away from our old neighborhood, a fresh start, clean lines, minimal decoration, no amenities, just possibility. I threw myself into work, started a new project, something challenging, something to keep my mind occupied, during the day at least. Nights were harder, lying awake, remembering, questioning, but each day got a little easier, each memory a little less sharp, each step forward a little more certain. And slowly, very slowly, I started to rebuild, not the life I had planned, but maybe something better, something stronger, something true, because now I knew the importa, NCE of trust, the value of self-respect, and the power of walking away when staying would cost you your soul.